I'm an avid camper and nature lover, and I've spent more nights out of my life under the stars than I have in bed in a house. If it's not snowing, you can usually find me down by the river or creek or near a big lake, though I tend to avoid ponds and such because of mosquitoes. Not that that matters much. I'm an experienced camper is what I'm trying to say, and I've dealt with quite a lot of crazy shit out in the bush. But the one thing that ever made me feel like I'd want to stop didn't happen while I was camping. I've dealt with bears, wolverines, shit, I even got a mountain lion to chill out once, which is a story in and of itself, but I digress. In my experience, people are way more dangerous and a threat to your life than anything you might find in the wild. Though I'd say that there's a lot of scary shit out there, there's no mistake about it. But people are more than likely to get you dead is what I'm saying. Anyway, I used to camp and fish at this spot that was at the southern border of Colorado and Wyoming, which is great for fishing and just being out in nature. It's really out of the way with not a lot of traffic of any kind, or so I thought. And it was my favorite spot until the last time I stayed there. Now I should say, I do have a house, like a permanent residence. I just go out to camp a lot. I'm not like a traveler or a vagrant or something of that nature. I've got all my permits, licenses, and whatnot. I also like people just fine, but I enjoy solitude. I go camping with friends, and more than friends a lot, but I also camp on my own too. I'm not trying to get away from anyone, I'm just trying to get closer to nature. Anyway, this spot is pretty great. And I'd been out there something like a dozen times, and almost every single time, I'd not seen or heard a soul. The last time, though, that was both the last time I went camping in that spot, and the last time I ever left my gun in my truck. The day had started pretty normal. I woke up, I packed up my gear, and I hit the truck stop for a shower, some coffee, and some breakfast. Kind of my standard routine when I'm more than an hour from my house. I was on a week-long trip which took me through a couple of my better camping spots and which would finish up closer to my house so I could go do some laundry. Once I'd eaten and I was caffeinated, I got in my truck and headed out to that remote spot. The drive was something like 20 minutes from the truck stop, and if what happened hadn't happened, I'd had stayed there for a few days, and then headed homeward. I got to the spot which was still mostly cleared from the last time I'd been there, and I set up my tent and sleeping bag the way I like. I'd filled a couple of thermoses of coffee when I left the truck stop, so after I got my folding chair up and a little fire going, I sat with my back to the tree and sipped on Java while contemplating my existence. Now, I wish I could tell you that I did something constructive, artistic, useful, or even that I just read, but the truth is that I pretty much just sit and stare into the fire. Occasionally, I will listen to music, but it ruins the feeling of being outdoors most of the time. Anyway, I sat there, stoking the fire, which had gotten low along with the sun in the sky, and it was getting darker, which meant that I'd either have to get more firewood or turn on a lantern, which I hate doing. So I got up and started looking around for some falling branches, which for the record is something I should have already done, even before having my coffee, but I was just ready to relax. I wasn't having much luck finding kindling and firewood near the campsite, so I headed further into the bush to hopefully find a dead tree or something. After what felt like more than 5 or 10 minutes, I got frustrated and turned back towards my camp to check in the other direction when I saw a pair of headlights on the other side of this tree. They were far away, and it was still bright enough that I hadn't seen them up until that point. I remember thinking it was pretty odd that someone else was out here camping, just because of the remoteness of the spot, which made me wonder if they might be stuck in the mud or have had an accident. Now, I am by nature a pretty friendly and helpful person. If I see someone in trouble, or I think someone's in trouble, I try to help them. It's just who I am. And so, without returning to my camp and my truck, I headed over towards the headlights to see what was going on. And yes, I am aware that this is a bad idea, and I'm not going to justify it, except to explain that I was already distracted and I felt a sense of security. I mean, this was my spot, after all, so why should I be worried? At least, I think that's where my brain was at the time. When I actually think about what I was doing, I kind of scream at myself. Anyway, I moved through these trees and I found myself on the same vehicle trail that my own truck was on, and realized that the headlights were coming from a vehicle that was using the same trail. So I just kept going down it to see if I could see any movement near the truck, but there wasn't any, and I wondered if they maybe walked off to take a leak or something. The headlights were powerful and kind of blinding, so as I got closer, I spent a lot of time just staring at the ground. By the time I got to the lights, I almost ran into the busted Dodge truck they were attached to. And when I say busted, I don't mean old. The thing was just a junker. There was no one in the driver or passenger's seat, so I decided to have a look around. There was no one at all around the truck, but there were a couple of old dirty shovels in the back, and the tailgate was down. Again, I realized that this should have set off alarms in my brain, but at the time, I didn't think a damn thing of it. I looked around for another minute or two and was about to call out to whoever might be around when I spotted another light in the distance. Out, way beyond the tree line, even further I would say, that my own camp was from the road, I saw a pair of lights beaming around in the growing twilight. I realized that what I'm looking at are headlamps, and the first thing I think of is that, hey, they might be arriving at camp late and are trying to set up before dark. And again, I wonder how I might help. Now I know what you're thinking, and you're right. I should have gotten right the hell out of there, pretended that I hadn't seen shit, and gone back to my camp, but no. What I should have done was go back and broke camp, thrown all my crap into the back of my truck, and floored it out of there. But I didn't do either of those things, though. With zero hesitation, my dumbass yelled out to whoever was using those headlamps. I told them that I was checking on the headlights because I thought they might be stuck in the mud, and asked them if they needed help getting their camp set up. I waited for a response, and while I can imagine someone being a little freaked out by being called out like that out of nowhere, the response I got was far from expected. Without any verbal reply, both of those headlamps just turned off, and that whole area became black as midnight pitch. Suddenly, I got this terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. I turned and I saw the shovels in the back of the pickup, and started putting two and two together, and realized suddenly that I'd left my gun and my shotgun in my damned truck. I bolted flat away from there and tore ass towards my own truck with a speed that I haven't had since I was in my teens. I ran as fast as I could, and I didn't stop for anything. I thought about ducking into the woods, but that would have slowed me down, and I didn't want them getting to my truck first. I just ignored the cramps and the growing pains in my legs as I flew down this camping trail. Now I was about halfway to my camp when I could hear shouting coming from behind me, and I knew that whoever this was isn't trying to make friends. They wanted to catch me before I could say anything to anyone about their truck. Then the sound of something heavy, like some more shovels hitting the flatbed, didn't help my growing concern either. I just kept pumping my legs and tried to ignore the further sounds of the car doors slamming shut and the engine gunning behind me. I knew that if I stopped or fell or even slowed down, I was probably going to die. Even if they didn't have guns, there were two of them, and one of me. and they had shovels, and I had back pain and a pocket knife, which is to say, nothing of them simply running me the hell over. Just as I was thinking that I couldn't keep going, I spotted a flash of light through the trees and knew that it was my campfire, which meant that my truck was just ahead. I veer off into the trees to the slight turnoff where I parked and make a beeline for it when I break out of the trees on the other side. Now these people were on me though, and like a blue-assed fly on a pile of dog shit, I just made it to my truck and got around to the passenger seat when those headlights rounded onto the turnoff from the road. I flung open the door to my truck and reached up to grab my shotgun off of the rack on the rear window. Whoever was in that truck was either on meth, or had just buried a body, or had just stashed a shitload of drugs. Or maybe all three. They were definitely trying to catch me, and if they could, kill me. Now I know that without a shadow of a doubt. Part of the reason I'm so sure is because when they rounded that tree, they didn't get out to talk to me all friendly or even lean out of the window. They gunned the engine and tried to ram my truck. Now it's a little hard to talk about what had happened next, because I'm still kind of nervy thinking about it. I've never, in my life, shot another human being. I don't even like to hunt. I've never even held a gun on someone. I mean, shit, I wasn't even strapped, which is dumb as hell, but that should tell you how I feel about the prospect of shooting someone. So you could take it to the bank when I raised that shotgun and fired into the right headlight of that truck. I didn't do it lightly. The light went out and the clearing got suddenly darker, and I still couldn't see who was inside the truck, but they could still see me and my big damn 12-gauge pump. The truck skidded to a wet sliding stop, only about 5 feet from my own truck, and I just raised that old Remington right at the windshield and racked another round into the chamber. I didn't say anything, and neither did they. We just sat there for what felt like 5 full damned minutes, until they threw the thing into reverse and backed out of the clearing and on to the trail road. As the other truck was pulling away, I tore my eyes away from the windshield for a second to check the license plate. But it didn't even have one on the front or the back, and once they were righted on the trail road, they blasted down it going Mach 6. But make no mistake, the barrel of my shotgun followed that truck until I couldn't see it anymore. I stood in that clearing for, 10 minutes before I let myself consider that they might be gone. Once I was reasonably sure that they weren't just going to come flying back down and wreck my truck, I ran back to my camp, grabbed everything that I couldn't replace, threw it into the bed of my truck. I then doused my fire and jumped into my cab, ready to haul ass all the way to the nearest town, and whatever police were there. As I pulled my truck up the trail road, I paused, because I heard something outside the truck that didn't sound right. It was like an animal call, but it sounded off. I rolled down my passenger side window, not wanting to get run up by one of those assholes swinging a pipe wrench. I can immediately tell that it's not an animal at all, but it's a woman screaming. For a second, I didn't even move because I was pretty goddamn scared, but I could only kind of hear her because of the sound of my truck, and then reluctantly I turned it off to hear whoever this was better. Again, I already know this was stupid, but if someone's in trouble, real trouble, the kind of trouble those jerks who tried to run me over brought with them, it just isn't in me to ignore that. The instant that I turned off the truck, I could hear her clear as day, and she was calling up from the road to, "You in the truck." I kind of stooped down to peer out my passenger window, and I saw this middle-aged lady, just booking it down the road towards me. I could barely see her in the dark, but she wore a kind of bright pink shirt, and not much else. This woman sounded absolutely terrified, and she begged me not to leave. So I just hollered out that I'm not going anywhere, and I turned onto the trail road to head towards her. My headlights showed that she wasn't wearing any shoes, but I couldn't see her face. I could still hear her hollering, and realizing that she's definitely crying, and damn, the panic in her voice. It really got to me. I drove down the road a piece to save her from having to walk the whole way. When she got up to the door, I could see that she was covered in dirt, leaves, and other random woodland crap, like she'd been wandering around the woods in the dark. She also just looked scared to death. I didn't ask her any of the questions I probably should have before opening the door, but she just looked so damn scared. All I wanted to do was reassure her that, regardless of what was going on, I'd drive her the hell out of there. Now, the woman didn't waste a second getting into the cab of my truck and slamming the door hard when she did. Told me that her name was Kesha, and that she'd been straight up kidnapped from Aurora just a few days prior. Her eyes went wide when she saw my shotgun, but I explained what happened, and she told me something that to this day still gives me shivers all over my damn body. Kesha looked me dead in the face, these tears coming down her cheeks, and she told me that I saved her life that night. Apparently, the two men who'd been driving that truck were looking for her when I came up on them. That's why they had the headlamps on. When I called out to them, they stopped looking, which gave her time to get further away. She hid when they came after me, and only found the road a little while before she spotted my headlights. She had no idea where she was or what direction to go in, and would have gotten lost if I hadn't come along. Or worse, they could have found her again. Now, I don't know what to say to any of that, and for a minute, I didn't say anything. But eventually I found my words, and just told her I was going to get her out of there. I then threw my truck into reverse, backed up to the clearing again, and turned around so that I was facing the right way. I then flew down that trail road with the intention of not slowing down until I hit pavement. So, we're flying down this road, and Kesha's just thanking me over and over as she's telling me the rest of her story. And apparently, these jerks had grabbed her off the street in Aurora. But at that point, they had a van. The van stalled and died on the way to Omaha, or somewhere. So, they'd stolen the truck, tied her up, and thrown her into the truck bed. She managed to get herself free during the drive, and when the truck stopped, she just jumped out and ran into the woods. Kesha admitted that when she heard the shotgun, she almost didn't come to find me, because she was scared, but she reasoned that they'd never had a gun, so whoever had fired probably wasn't them. I told her I was glad she took the chance, and we both kept talking about the odds of it all. We both agreed that someone was looking out for her for sure, and what happened next only proved it. As we hit the turnoff onto the main paved road, and I was ready just to floor it until I saw a cop, or we got to a sheriff's office or something, a single bright light appeared right in front of us. Now, for a second I thought it was a flashlight, but then I heard an engine revving as those two guys came flying at us from across the damn road. I peeled out into a turn, but I was only just fast enough, and they clipped the back of my truck. We slammed together hard, and Kesha and I got thrown around. She screamed then, and it made me feel so awful, because I'm terrified we're both gonna die. I hit my head on my window, and my head was bleeding, but when I looked through my window, I could see that the dipshit kidnappers aren't doing much better. And so, on pure instinct, I gunned the engine, and I kept turning. The vehicles scraped together, but I didn't give a shit, because it meant that the driver in the other truck couldn't get out. And once I was free, I kept going and didn't stop until we got to civilization. And even then, I only slowed a little. I kept looking in my rear view the whole time for a single headlight, but never saw it. They'd either taken off or were following us with no headlights. I drove straight to the police and explained everything that had happened, and Kesha gave her statement as well. They kept telling us both how lucky we were, and we didn't disagree in the slightest. Apparently, that road is being used by human traffickers a lot, and it's become a serious problem over the last 10 years or so. They took us both to a hospital to check us out. They were worried that I had a concussion, but I turned out to be okay. Kesha had some bad burns from the rope on her arms though, and she was dehydrated. I was released pretty quickly, but they kept Kesha overnight, so I stuck around to make sure that she had a ride. I actually wound up taking her back to Aurora the next day, as it wasn't much of a drive. Now, I'd love to tell you that this was the beginning of a wonderful romance because Kesha's a beautiful woman, but she's also very married. We do still talk sometimes, and we do chat a lot, but I don't have much in common outside of what happened. She still says I'm her hero, though, and that's good enough for me. So yeah, sometimes doing something dangerous or foolish can lead you into a situation where you can help someone. Food for thought, I guess.